This is another episode of the 5enses podcast. I'm your host, Robert Zinni. Today we have Kari Hull from Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance and Patrick Grady from Yavapai Climate Change Coalition to give us an update about Prescott's Earth Week. And I'm excited to talk to these two people because Patrick was on our show earlier this month, and because of the pandemic, we had to delay a little bit about that. But they're here to give us an update of how we can still be engaged at Earth Week next week, even though we may have to do this virtually. So good afternoon, Kari and Patrick. How you doing?
Good, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So Kari, you have been a community organizer for probably most of your adult life. And so I just want to know, like, how can we still engage in Prescott's Earth Week? And what have you done to adapt to our current situation with the pandemic?
Wow, it has literally been a whirlwind of activity because I just was reflecting back on this, I think last night or yesterday, that we had just finished organizing all the in-person events, which were, as you know, substantial, probably 15, maybe 12 to 15, just in the Prescott area. And so we had just got that information out, pushed it out, and then this happened. And it was kind of like this weird week. And I remember, Patrick, we were kind of meeting with everybody, like kept meeting at the porch. Like, this was before the social distancing started. And it was like we would go to the porch and everybody would be there from all organizations. And I was like, and then it was like, and then we didn't see anybody, for the past, 2 to 3 weeks. But in those 2 to 3 weeks, just nobody even said what to do. Jenna Ortega, my cohort community organizer and Flagstaff, we were just like, well, I guess we're just going to go digital. Like, we didn't have a meeting about it. Like, the board of directors didn't say this is what we're going to do. We just naturally are animals of, like, if it's possible, we're going to do it. So we have transformed and pivoted completely to digital. And the upside for our the regional virtual Earth Week of Northern Arizona is that the events that we had planned in Flagstaff, Sedona, Cottonwood, and Prescott, they're still being planned by those teams, but now everybody gets to participate. So that's the silver lining. And so it's really kind of cool that Jenna, who usually works in her region, and I work in mine, and we work together, but now we are literally doing it all together. So it's been kind of fun, super stressful. This whole technology learning curve is not my whole adult life. I really appreciate you saying that, Robert, because you make it seem like I'm 30, but I'm 53. And anybody who has ever been a volunteer or worked with me in any capacity, they know the first thing that I delegate is anything that has to do with technology. Instagram, Facebook, But now I have to lead and learn, and now I'm able to delegate a little bit more, but we've had to learn all the platforms. We're utilizing Zoom, and we got a donation from a very generous board member that helped us upgrade for webinars so that we can conduct more professional presentations through Earth Week. And it's just like we got lots of plates in the air right now, and it's all happening.
Right. So, well, kudos to you two for continuing with Prescott's and Northern Arizona's Earth Week. And it was interesting, Patrick, because I was going over our last podcast, and there's this minute about how, where you were expanding downtown, and there's going to be this great celebration, and now it has to be virtual. So that's definitely an impact on the week. But how can the Prescott community still be engaged with all the events that you've had scheduled?
Well, first and foremost, I want to compliment both Kari and Jenna for their work. Been a learning curve for them, and for speaking for my generation, for me as well. And so Zooming every day is a new experience, and I miss the physical contact. But the virtual week that we've set up We've got a real positive response from a number of our team leaders. So we have events that focus on personal actions that you can take. We have 3 youth events coordinated by our Prescott College intern, Annie Baker from North Carolina. She's doing all of this. And we have some really potentially engaging conversations set up on April 22nd, which is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day itself. We have a panel, which I'll expand on in a few moments, and then another panel the next day that Kari and I host, which is really talking about, so what's the future hold for the local climate change movement? And so really within the last 24 hours, Kari and Jenna have gotten out the entire schedule with all of the directions on how one can join these meetings. My advice to folks watching this podcast is register now, because even though we're able to reach a number of people through Zoom, there is a people limit. So, and that limit is 100 minus the number of panelists that we might have. We have some really good panelists on a couple of events. So, yeah, it'll be exciting, and we'll be taking answers. We'll have conversations. We'll go into the chat room. It'll be good, and it'll hopefully continue to build our movement.
Yeah. What's really exciting about this is we've never done it before. So I'm glad we're starting tomorrow night with a poster painting party, because I feel like we can't really mess that one up. So, but in regard to that, it's such a good point you make there, Patrick. We are also going to be recording all the events, and they're going to be posted up on the NAZCCA YouTube channel. But for those that don't frequent our channel, which isn't very many people, we're also going to post it up on our website. So what's great about this has also been, now we're really utilizing our digital platforms like we've never had before. Our website's amazing. And so I'm going to add just the whole, all the recordings for Earth Week right there. So if you miss it, you can't ask any questions, but you can watch the whole program in its entirety. So that's cool. But yeah, definitely register early, or if it's a Zoom, that's for a webinar, is pre-registration, and that's all, the links are there. But if it's a meeting, you just join in the moment.
And so, I would add that if, for example, you're not on one of our lists, and you should be, but if you're not on NAZCCA or YCC or a Sierra Club or a Prescott Indivisible lists, you could go to www.nazcca.org and then do what, Kari? Go to the calendar,
events,
and you'll find events for the Flagstaff region, Prescott region, et cetera.
Yeah, and just remember, everybody needs to check out all the cities, because we don't have all they're not all listed in one place. Each city that's organizing the events, they're posted on that event calendar, but you can go to any of them.
Okay. So that's great information. And so for the Prescott region, could you two highlight some of the cool virtual events that you'll be sponsoring next week, so we all can keep on engaging with sustainability and Earth Week celebrations?
Kari, would you do the youth events first, and I'll do the 21st, and I'll do the 22nd and 23rd?
Sure. So let's see here. Yep. So we have our poster painting party tomorrow night. That starts. These are all Arizona time. So that starts at 4 p.m. And basically, it's just a way to connect people, young people and families, to get them excited about, when we actually do get to go out and do some Earth marches or global climate strikes led by the youth. We'll have our signs already pre-done, and just a way to connect and actually practice some of these meetings before the more serious ones come up. And then Saturday, the 18th at 9 a.m. is Passion for the Planet. It's our second annual Earth Week Youth Summit. What's really cool about that one is we have it starting at 9 a.m. because we're going to have some global participation from young people, hopefully from Sweden, potentially Africa. So everything is still just kind of developing, and it's super organic. So, which is kind of fun. But we always hope for the best and, aim pretty high. So do you want to talk about any now, Patrick, or do I keep going?
I'll add to the Youth Summit. Your viewers would be interested to know that North Point hosted our first Youth Summit last year. And we have some North Point students, by the way, that are participating in this Youth Summit. We have a student from NAU, and we're hopeful for a number of other high school students here from the Prescott region, as well as potentially around the state. So I think it's really important for us older adults to tune in and support the youth, because we need to hear their stories, we need to hear their concerns, what they're passionate about. And I think, frankly, you'll be like me and inspired by their messages.
No, I agree with you. Like last year, I was the moderator for that, and we had about 8 to 9 students from colleges, Bradshaw Mountain, North Point. I think a basis person was there too, and I walked away with that, like you said, with a lot of inspiration, because these students, the younger generation, will have to learn how to live in a warmer climate. They'll have to think of different ways, innovative ways to make sure that their region, wherever they live, especially in Prescott, how can they prevent, let's just say, uneasy living, or just prevent not having policy in place, or having the ideas and the knowledge to curb whatever is going to go down their way. And hearing youth talk about this one topic is so inspirational. I know there's a lot of trolls out there, and we don't, like I said, we don't have to get into a debate about if it's man-made or if it's a cyclical thing, but we all can notice that with scientific data, it all is pointing to a warmer climate. And if they're going to inherit it, then we need to open the doors and have them have that platform for them to share their ideas, because again, they're going to live with it, and they're going to be the ones that are going to problem solve. And so I'm looking forward to the 18th Youth Summit as well, because these young kids, when they're passionate and they care, they can really change the world and turn some heads.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point that you bring up there that makes me think about some conversations that have been had comparing COVID-19 and the current emergency and crisis that we're in. No choice, right? It's happening. And so we've had to act fast, adapt, pivot, plan. While people knew there would be pandemics or whatever, but it was always that kind of like, well, it's not happening right now, just like climate change. And so our organization is really going to try to capitalize on that and kind of help draw attention to what that means. Like, now, do you see how that in Paradise Fire that was in paradise, right? So you don't have to talk to the paradise people about what it's like to be vulnerable and have a community crisis. So, but for some reason, it's always really hard for people to think that it's really going to impact them and their community. But now I feel like this is a good example to demonstrate to people how it can happen to your community, and how these crises, they shouldn't be over there or happening to them. This is us and we. And so, we're the only ones that are going to be able to solve this problem. And I do hope that we can count on the young people, the next generation, to help lead us, because I think that we may not have done the best job leading so far. So maybe it's time for us to step aside and let them teach us a few things.
Mm-hmm.
And then moving to the week of April 21st, on that day, we have Gary Beverly of the Sierra Club actually reprising his speaker role that he did at the Prescott Public Library earlier this year, and then going live with Q&A that night for that particular presentation on both personal and political actions that individuals can take to address climate change. And I know that 5enses is carrying his article, and also carrying an article that I wrote about collective action in our community that can contribute to our efforts with the local climate change movement. So that would be a good one to listen into. Then on the 21st, we have a panel on sustainability.
It's the next day, Patrick. It's the 22nd.
On the 22nd, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And on that panel, where it's entitled Sustainability, Think Globally, Act Locally. And we have Laird Christensen from Prescott College, Darcy Hitchcock from the Sustainability Alliance in Sedona in the Verde Valley, and Mackenzie Jones from the City of Sedona. She's their sustainability coordinator, and Debbie Cotton from our own YZCC, who's been engaged in climate planning with our team for well over a year. So that panel will initially have some brief presentations by each of those panelists talking again about sustainability, climate action, risk assessment, and resiliency. As Kari just used the term adaptation, how does a community adapt to a changing climate? Are we prepared to do so? And because there'll be modest presentations, I believe a lot of opportunity then to engage in conversation with those specific panelists.
And what's really exciting about that particular event is it was a Prescott event, but then we were utilizing a lot of Sedona speakers, and we work in Sedona, so we've mobilized that team to kind of get involved over there. So this is we're doing a co-event with Sedona and Prescott, and it's super inspiring because what they're talking about really only is impactful if all the communities do this together. Because Flagstaff has their climate change and action plan and adaptation plan in place, but they just can't work in a vacuum. They're not the only one that has a forest that's vulnerable to fires, and so our organization is really working so hard to dovetail all of the city officials and the work that they're doing and help steward them along, just to work together. We're not setting the agenda. We want them to see what other cities are doing and how they can work together to make the work more impactful, so that we can all be renewable and sustainable and resilient together.
Yeah, and I think when you look at best practices around the country, and you talk to city leaders, and I'm not referring to any particular city within our community, I'm referring more generally to each of the larger cities in our Quad Cities region, as well as the rest of Yavapai County. Those examples are the most relevant. Those examples are citizenry can see, oh yeah, they're just over the hill, and oh, they've done this, this, and this. That's potentially a good model for us to look at. So that's another good reason for having allies like the Sustainability Alliance, which is a citizen grassroots organization focused on a variety of sustainability issues within their region. And then, of course, looking at the actual city practice of having a full-time sustainability coordinator is an interesting move that the city of Sedona took perhaps just a couple of years ago, I believe.
Right. It's nice to see different cities around Arizona coming together for sustainability. My mind always goes to the Verde Valley Archaeology Center. The archaeologist there, his name is Ken Zoll. And when he talked to my class, when we just did about an ancient culture class, 800 years ago in the Verde Valley, there was a civilization there, and then they just vanished, right? And he told our class that the reason was climate change. The seasonal patterns changed, and so these indigenous cultures had to move. And so when we talk about climate change, I just think about sustainability. Like, it's not a hoax, right? It's going to impact everyone. And I want to get back to Kari's point about when you compared the pandemic to climate change, right? We still have some people in this country that may not take this pandemic seriously enough because maybe it hasn't impacted their communities yet. And just to kind of segue to the April 22nd, the Sustainability Think Globally, Act Locally, that's kind of what we have to do when it comes to sustainability. Is on a global scale, different patterns are changing. The ice caps are melting, right? I mean, 12,000 years ago, we had a climate change disaster called the last ice age, right? That's in the geological record that definitely transformed human civilization. So I guess what I'm trying to get at with like maybe the climate deniers out there is like, we don't have to debate it anymore. Like there's scientific facts about that. And the one thing that I want to back it up with is pandemic. We have a lot of science, and what I've been looking at is there's been a lot more like pro science talk out there because of the people who considered it a hoax and whatnot. And again, it's about impact in the community. It's not one political party against another one. It's how can we better northern Arizona and the Quad City area so we can prevent a forest fire, so we can prevent some ecological disaster that we may have to migrate somewhere else. Or what Patrick got to in our last podcast is we may be a hub for Phoenix migrants in the future. Don't know if it's going to be 10, 20 years, but what y'all are promoting is we need to look at the long game of how to become more sustainable and making sure that our community will last a long time that other people can enjoy.
That's actually you should join our podcast on the 23rd because that's what Gary and I will be talking about. So where do we go from here? So We've heard Gary's talk. We've got input from the youth summit, and of course there's an awful lot of other events around Earth Day itself going on across the globe, and we'll be getting feedback from the panel the night before. So what are we going to do to scale up our local sustainability and climate movement? How are we going to move from a primary and important focus on mobilizing to organizing and encourage and inspire others to join the teams that NAZCCA and YCC have set up in particular critical areas such as renewable energy, or Andy Baker, our intern, heading up the youth activism team, or we have a team that Debbie Cotton works with on climate action planning, and we have a new interfaith climate action team. So that discussion is less presentation on the 23rd. It's more about feedback and engagement. So it'll be more of a town hall kind of setting, if you will, without the physical contact that we all miss.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what's so great about Yavapai Climate Change Coalition and the work that we're doing is it's very localized, and it's not like we're not developing a plan and forcing it on the city and on the community. We're kind of like the conduit between the city government and the community to help them have voices to the lawmakers that were elected to serve the community, so that they can hear what their concerns are and what are other cities that are like ours, right? So that's, you want to model it after similar cities. And then we just, everybody just, the conversation starts and you take just one step. I mean, we're not, we don't need to solve the whole problem by the end of 2020. But what we do need to do is make sure that we are having conversations and meetings and plans going on, so that we are adapting and preparing for what's to come.
Right. And I think it just shows what you've done with going from physical interaction, socializing Earth Week to a virtual platform, because it just shows that as humans, we can adapt to any circumstances. It's just, will we allow our stubbornness or our ignorance to not adapt to our changing circumstances?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we are literally demonstrating what we need to do, right? I mean, we could have easily just put on a couple of Earth Week events, or Earth Day events, and just been, a little bit more mellow about it. But hey, we just, if our teams want to do something, it's our job to support that and to make it happen. And so it's exciting. And we don't have fear of this wasn't perfect or whatever. We just want to. We're grassroots all the way through and through. So as I say that, and everybody attends our events, please be forgiving should I drop audio or something.
Please. Yeah. It's that, it's kind of like we have to learn different social norms now when it comes to Zoom meetings, or like the first day we had shelter in place, I went to the store without a mask, and my friend who's a nurse like just berated me about how inconsiderate I am. Well, I'm sorry, I don't know the etiquette of a pandemic yet. Like, give me a couple days to figure it out how I can do that.
Right. Or the CDC told us not to, and now they're telling us to do it. So, and that's fine. And so we all have to be, so what I've learned is we have to be a lot more forgiving of each other. I mean, my experience in working in this hyperbolic time frame, short, digital, because digital and electronic communications, they lack a lot of emotion that you can have. And so things are misunderstood, feelings are hurt, but the work has to go on. So there's a lot of counseling and so, yeah. But what it just makes us stronger. It makes us stronger as an organization and hopefully as a community and a country and globally understanding how this is all, we're one world.
Right. We are with different cultures, which are beautiful as well, too. It's like we are, in a way, what your organizations are. Now, please tell me if I'm going off with this analogy, but you're like kind of like Paul Revere. You're kind of warning us that something's coming, and will we believe it or not? Right now, Paul Revere definitely said the British were coming, but
they did,
and they did, right?
I mean, one thing I'd like to say to that is, since I started this job a year and a half ago, we've literally moved from climate change, how to dialogue with deniers, to where we are now, which is now transitioned to a climate emergency. We're not Paul Revere's saying this is what's coming. We're saying this is what's happening. And the pandemic is a perfect example of it. And I'm having a call to action for some of our professionals and scientists this isn't about scaring people. This is just about informing them. Like, where do pandemics come from? And would they possibly have anything to do with global warming? Like when areas and when you lose biodiversity and animals cannot reside there anymore, then they migrate. Like, it all ties together. I mean, that's what science is. That's not my area. I'm just here to help connect average people to the information and then ask the scientists to put it in plain terms that people can understand it. And and so I'm very fortunate to have this job, and I think it's extremely important and effective. I think it's working.
Good. I mean, I'm seeing it around Prescott as well. And thank you for your great work, Gary. I mean, you said it like we're in a climate crisis right now, and it's just to educate people. And I think once somebody who could be a denier just has the information, then they can make their own opinion out there. But, for me, I always look at the history of everything. Like, there was a little ice age in the medieval times, right? And that was right around the same period of the Black Plague, And if we want to talk about diseases correlating with climate change, if we have a warmer climate, well, then the ticks and the mosquitoes are going to go further away from the equator. And, those have deadly diseases too, or lifelong diseases like Lyme disease from tick bites,
Right. So it's connecting the dots, right? Yep. So that's happening, but people don't realize the connection that it has to climate change. Like, you just say climate change and people are like, like they just fog over. Like, that's something, like they don't even know what it really means. I mean, I know I didn't when I first started, but now after, 16 months of lecture after lecture, I feel pretty confident that not only do I know what it is, I also get like what my job is. It's to help other people understand. I mean, climate change is just the big word for it. It's happening all around us all the time. And so that's why we have to act now and engage our community. And that's where it comes in, that delicate balance of not scaring people is, because you can come in as fear mongering, and they're just saying that to scare us. But it's not true. Knowledge is power. When you know better, you do better. I mean, I don't mean to simplify it, but that's literally how my life is run. So, and I feel like that's a good simple way to look at it. When you know better, you do better. And so together, we need to. Behavior changes.
No, I agree. And simple actions too. Like I like the article that Patrick wrote about the tips that everybody can do on a daily basis. Just doing your part. And it's not asking you to like change your whole lifestyle and whatnot, but minimize plastic use, recycle, reduce, reuse, everything. So switching topics before we end the podcast, we got into a little bit about like climate deniers or like the science behind it and whatnot. I want to know if either of you have noticed or what scientists are seeing about our planet ever since the pandemic.
Well, I've read some articles, and I don't pretend to be an expert on the lessening impacts, but candidly, when you look at a city like Los Angeles, for example, they say that their air quality has actually improved substantially to back to where it was in the 1990s. And with the impact on reduced air traffic, for example, I think air travel is down 90%. With reduced transportation, although I suspect there's still a slew of trucks on the road, but reduced transportation by a lot of us car drivers. I think you're seeing some impacts, but candidly, unless we change our mindset, that is a short-term impact. The likelihood, unless we change our patterns, the likelihood is that the economy will eventually come roaring back. And that economy is based on growth, it's based on consumption, and that it is candidly what's driving our difficulty of achieving a low carbon future. For me, the pandemic experience relationship to climate change, in obviously the tragedy of deaths and impacts of the coronavirus across the globe, affects us nearly every day. I mean, for me personally, I'm blessed to have friends like Kari who can kind of buoy me up, and to have something to work on like Earth Week. So I'm not just at home isolated, but for millions, the impact of the coronavirus impact, economically, health-wise, et cetera, is huge. So I don't like to make too much of this, but I have read several articles that stress the hopefulness that has come out of perhaps seeing governments and nations working together in the face of this pandemic. And I'd like to just read something it's very brief, from a former official with the United Nations. And I think it speaks to some of the things that we're saying, but I think he says it better than I would have ad-libbed it. So he writes, "The pandemic is far from over, but it has already brought certain truths which should have been evident into stark relief. Number one, viruses do not respect borders. Number two, without solidarity, we will not defeat this pandemic. Number three, scientific knowledge and advice matter." We've mentioned that a couple of times this afternoon. And number four, delay is deadly. And he ends by simply saying, these same lessons hold true for climate change and the climate crisis that we're currently in. Pretty simple, pretty basic truths, but that really hit home to me when that particular article came across a couple of days ago.
Right. I mean, all of those 4 steps seem logical no matter what disaster it could bring.
Too big to fail. We don't have enough money to switch from fossil fuel to renewable energies. It just costs too much. I mean, we are spending trillions and trillions of government funding in reaction to this pandemic. And so I can't tell you how frustrating it is to always be reacting and not doing proactive investment into this transition that we know that we need to be leaders on. I mean, you just look at Arizona. I mean, I don't even know what number we are in solar energy, but we're pretty low. And I'll tell you who number one is. It's New Jersey. So it's so embarrassing. And, it's all just about political will. It's like, where do we want to spend our money? Well, I think the people need to be able to say and have a voice and start in your vote matters. I don't care, I don't care what political party you are, but you have to vote, and you need to know who you vote for is going to push forward progressive, renewable transitions for a healthier planet. And, so I just wanted to say that as far as the relation to what's going on with the pandemic and climate change is, how are you spending your money? And we always get accused that it's so expensive to do the transition, but now this isn't even an investment, right? This money that the government is spending, and I totally support it, obviously, but we have to start thinking differently about how we go about, reacting and adapting and, being sustainable. That's what being sustainable means,
Yep.
So.
No, I agree. And so if you want more information on how you can be engaged with being more sustainable, but more importantly, celebrating the 50 years of Earth Day, right, next week,
Yes.
You can tune in to Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance and Yavapai Climate Change Coalition's websites. We'll have links in the bottom of our description here. And again, if you haven't been a part of Prescott's Earth Week before, it'll be different this year, but it just shows the adaptability of these two organizations to give you that knowledge to think about a little differently, right? And again, it's about making a sustainable future for everyone to benefit, and just to put something else in, not only being sustainable will help, and investing in new technologies will help heal the planet, but also there's a lot of economic investments and growth that could happen from that too. So again, if you want to learn more about this, whether it's from the youth, different political candidates from around Northern Arizona, or if you want to be a part of the drum circle that will happen virtually at the last day, tune in for that. And I just want to say thank you to Kari Hull and Patrick Grady for spending this afternoon with us to give us an update about what's going on with Prescott's and Northern Arizona's Earth Week. This is Robert Zinni signing off of 5enses podcast. You can go to 5enses, mag.com for more information, and also like us on Facebook and Instagram. And now I found out that we have a Twitter, so we can tweet now, even though I don't really like tweeting. But anyways, stay tuned, and I hope to see some of you virtually next week on the different platforms of Earth Week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.